Zechariah vision number 2. Nice snowy drive to work. So we have the 4 horns, got the 4 craftsmen, depending on the translation. I've even heard plowmen might be a good idea, so we'll hit that in a second. And I think I got the horns down pretty good the first time I went through this. The second time I went through it, a little different because I had more of that vision I mentioned last time of, not a vision, I don't really have a vision, but the idea that everything's about the temple, which is, it is. As you get into later visions, they're all about the temple, all about the temple. So just keeping that temple in mind. Temple, 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 and the New Jerusalem, and the new temple, right? The new temple with New Jerusalem, Ezekiel's temple. Keeping that in mind. But first, the horns. Why horns? We see horns in Daniel. There could be leaders, they could be nations. I think the cross reference I saw in my studies Bible, NRSV, Cultural Context Bible, mentioned Deuteronomy, I forget what it was, about horns to gore. I don't know if it was gore Israel or gore the nations. I can't really remember what. But we have this idea of like a bull, right? A bull that would gore or wound. Wake up Israel, perhaps. And if we're thinking temple, it's actually, there's a more expanded view on what I had before on the horns. We're thinking, okay, what were the 4, not just sent the people into exile, but destroyed or desecrated the temple. So Syria and Sennacherib plundered the temple, didn't fully conquer Jerusalem. They had sent Northern Kingdom in exile, but they also laid siege. So we had that whole angel of death come and wipe out a bunch of the army, but they had still stripped a lot of gold from the temple and took it back to Assyria. So there was a bit of a desecration there. Babylon for sure. They get a horn. They straight up destroyed the temple. And I mentioned Baruch last time and the walls falling down, so we can maybe even assume that part of the temple's destruction had to do with, the Ark of the Covenant being swallowed in the earth. So maybe the temple had fallen and people lost hope. The walls were down and Babylon just walked in because God didn't want Babylon to think that they did it on their own. So they get a horn. We're going to give the Greeks via the Seleucid Empire horn. As Alexander, he showed up to Jerusalem, but the story is that he just bypassed it because someone came out and showed him the scroll of Isaiah predicting him. Or maybe it was Daniel. I think it was Daniel, actually. I don't think Isaiah does that. Isaiah predicts Cyrus. But later we have the Seleucids and kind of the Ptolemies were in Egypt. And Israel's right in the middle. So we had another desecration of the temple. This one more pagan, occultic, Hellenizing of the people. The Assyrians, they just wanted the gold, right? They stripped the gold. As far as I know, they didn't do any setting up any idols or sacrificing of pigs or anything like that. So the Greeks take the cake there. So we'll give them a horn. And that was probably one of the greatest genocides Israel had faced. This wasn't even about war. This was about just slaughtering. They were already subjugated under the Greeks at this point. Titus IV was killing them because they wanted to keep their Torah, right? So it is a different story. So Rome in, I think it was around 66, we have Pompey. He conquers Jerusalem, brings on in Herod the Great. Well, Herod the Great kind of petitioned to be there. He had some friendship with Mark Antony, Cleopatra. I don't know if Cleopatra liked him very much, but Mark Antony, yeah. And then we have the destruction of the temple in 70 AD by the Romans. They had a couple couple desecrations beforehand, setting up some idols. Read Josephus, you get a lot of stories there of different things, but so give them several accounts. So we skipped an empire, right? Persia, you're like, well, they're not a horn. What about Purim? Purim is this week. Sorry, Esther, huh? So this is going to be a great genocide. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Haman's pretty bad, and even the king himself was not a great guy, right? A lot of the fictionalized versions beginning, he's a good guy, but I think he hated the Jews just as much. He just feared Yahweh. He wasn't as dumb as like Belshazzar was, drinking out of all the temple bowls and stuff, and partying and mocking God because the temple hadn't been rebuilt. And a day later, Cyrus conquers him. So I think he didn't like the Jews, but he knew that if he stopped them, that would be bad for his empire. He was smart. Let them do their thing. He had learned from the Assyrians. He had learned from the Babylonians. They all know the history of Abraham and what he did. Genesis 14 war against the four kings, because remember where those four kings were, from lands of Assyria and Babylon and all those future places. 800,000 is the number that Abraham in this 318 took down. The original 300. I better get a move on here. So there's the four horns tied to the temple. Craftsmen, more tricky, but immediately thinking craftsmen, I don't really thought about this, is craftsmen are important for the building of the temple, right? So who were these four craftsmen? Maybe Moses. He never lived in the promised land, but he's an important guy. He downloaded the plans, right? So that was important. And then we have maybe Solomon, probably for sure. Zerubbabel would be in the context of Zechariah. We should probably name him. I don't think I can go that way. I'll go this way. And we'll say maybe Herod the Great. And then you're like, well, that's only three. You're not counting Moses. I'm like, you're right. We're not counting Moses. So I think Jesus, high priest, future king, builder of the New Jerusalem, Ezekiel's temple. I think we can count him. All right, that's it.